Hello and welcome in to ETR's first ever First Look show. I am Gary Hartman. I'm going to be here with you likely every Tuesday morning for a quick glance, first look at the coming NFL DFS slate. The purpose of this show is to get you familiar with the week ahead, to get an early look at what plays jump out at us as a team at ETR, what matchups are intriguing before we really start to get into concrete projections, ownership projections, all that kind of thing. We figure this could be a good way to start getting your brain in the mindset of transitioning from one slate to the next, and start thinking about matchups, pricing, and DFS in general, which is, of course, the best form of fantasy sports. Really excited to do this. We're going to try to keep it pretty lean, like 15, 20 minutes every week, just kind of a need to know, what jumps out. Keep in mind, I am a GPP player by trade. So my brain certainly tends to lean in that direction when I'm, giving analysis. But, if I see something that I think really stands out as a cash play, I will be sure to bring that up. We're going to go position by position on this show, jump around to the plays that I think are worth discussing. Worth noting, as I'll start to share my screen here, and we'll take a look at DraftKings. This will be, tilted towards DraftKings for sure, as it's easier to kind of go through that all at once. But at the end, we'll kind of do some rapid fire FanDuel takes. But, certainly a lot of high-end options off the board on this slate right off the bat. We have the awesome upcoming matchup on Thursday night with the Chiefs and the Chargers. So they're off the main slate. And then we have the double Monday night header this week, Philly, Minnesota, and Tennessee, Buffalo. So a ton of heavy hitters off this slate, already making for a more intriguing GPP slate, in my opinion, than week one with all of those heavy hitters out there. So let's start right at quarterback and kind of, break this down right off the top. If you've read anything I've done, or if you've listened to me throughout the years, I am a big proponent of spending up at quarterback. Obviously the guys that are most expensive usually will be the people that have the highest ceiling by a long shot. Also, usually the kind of guys that are those dual threat quarterbacks that give a floor ceiling combo. So you see that once again at the top of quarterback here this week. We have Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson as the top three. There's a theme there, at least with Kyler and Russ, and that is bounce back spot for sure. Kyler going into LV, another one of these, what we'd expect to be kind of heavy hitter play up matchups from both sides. The Raiders and the Cardinals, we would expect to be, looking to bounce back from that week one disappointment. And I think there's a lot of interesting looks there for DFS for sure. Definitely wouldn't be scared off of using Kyler at all this week. Underneath that, you see Lamar Jackson. He's in play every week that he's on the slate. He's back home this week, played the Jets in week one. Wasn't disappointing at all. Didn't hit a massive ceiling though. He's definitely in play every single time there's a slate, especially when you take Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes off the board. He's one of the main guys that I'd be looking at this week. And then, man, these Denver guys this week is going to be a theme as we go through this show here, because obviously, super disappointing performance out of them last night in Russell Wilson's return to Seattle. But I would expect Denver, who is now priced, who is still priced, before this game happened. I don't know if these guys would have been priced down a little bit more if it went after the game, but it's 7,200 against a Houston team. Denver going back home. There's no way that team wants to start 0-2, not in the tough AFC West, not in the tough AFC in general. Would really expect Russ to come out and have a big game next week. So I'm really into some of these Denver guys, at first look this week for sure. As you go down the board a little bit there, a couple pocket passers in Joe Burrow and Tom Brady. Brady struggled in New Orleans throughout most of his career. He's 6,400. Since he's gone over to Tampa, he's 6,400. I'm probably not so interested in Brady this week compared to some of the guys above him. Burrow's looking for redemption. Amazing that the Bengals even stayed in that game as long as they did. Obviously got completely beat up through a bunch of interceptions. Wouldn't be too scared off of going to him in a Dallas team that is just completely, lost right now, I would say. Stafford's a really interesting guy. 10-day rest coming off the Thursday night game. But man, I'm a little scared of that Rams team in general right now. I don't know what's going on with his arm. The offense looked a little bit lost for sure. Buffalo looked like a different class of team. There's Super Bowl hangover narratives that you can get into. But, with the long rest, back at home, coming off a disappointing game, 6,300 in a good matchup, certainly in lineups where I'm using Kupp, I would not be afraid to be pairing him with Stafford. Usually you say it the other way around. Anytime I use Stafford, I would definitely have Kupp locked in there for sure. But in the lineups that I do have Kupp, I would consider a Stafford team. Derek Carr is a guy for me that I'm never super interested in fantasy. I think he's one of those really high floor guys that doesn't quite hit the ceiling that a lot of his peers do. But at 6,200 in a good matchup, I don't think I'd be writing him out of my pool this week. The guy I want to talk about most, I think, this week, and you saw him as the cover boy of the thumbnail here on YouTube, and that's Trey Lance. If you read my GPP leverage column this past week, I didn't even include Trey Lance in my pool, and that was before all of the bad weather in Chicago. I mean, that was a 40-point total. His first game, the Niners were 7-point spreads. There were so many great plays on the slate. That was an easy one for me to leave out. I think it's completely opposite this week. He fits right back into that theme of bounce back quarterbacks. Man, I just don't think I could take anything away from that week 1 matchup. It was just brutal weather. It was in Chicago. I think Justin Fields threw the ball like 8 times, good on Chicago to get that win. But now San Francisco going back home against the Seattle team that's going to be riding high on short rest. And Trey Lance is 5,700, and he's still one of the real, true dual threat quarterbacks that we have. This seems like a big San Francisco bounce back spot, and that really does include Lance. At first glance at 5,700 is going to allow you to do different things in your lineup. He is the most intriguing guy to me in this whole quarterback room, especially because you are taking Mahomes, Herbert, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, Jalen Hurts, all off this slate. And yeah, I get that we have Lamar and Kyler and Russ and some good guys up there, but it's so much easier to go to Trey Lance and a mid-tier guy when those, true big hitters are off the slate. So, man, Trey Lance really looks good to me at first glance this week. Going down here, I'm not too interested in any of these really, really cheap options. Jared Goff at home against Detroit. I think that's in play. Detroit's offense looks to be pretty good. And, I think that a lot of their game environments are going to be shootout-y, especially there at home. Moving down the list here, I usually am intrigued by Daniel Jones for DFS tournaments. I don't think he's a very good real-life quarterback. Definitely is someone that is dual threat. 5,100, really cheap. If you really need the salary saving to get down from Lance, I think he'd be the guy that I'd be looking at home there. But, I don't think I'm so interested in these cheap guys. No reason to go to Cooper Rush. He's starting for Dallas. He's only $100 less than Daniel Jones and, some of these other starters there. So, I think that's kind of what we're looking at quarterback. Will be very interesting to see where ownership comes in on these top guys and on someone like Trey Lance, because, definitely some plays that stand out there at quarterback. So I think moving over to running back here, Jonathan Taylor still by far the most expensive play on the slate at 9,900 on DraftKings. Man, we had all this Frank Reich coach speak in the offseason that, they didn't think Taylor's usage was going to be as high. Naheem Hines is going to be more involved, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, maybe this game ended up being closer than they thought. And they needed Taylor's just stability to stay in it. I'm not sure. But usage was still crazy. 70 total snaps to Naheem Hines' 26, 33 of 36 rushing snaps. He ran on 31 of them. Was it that he was in on? Really, really crazy stuff. And he was productive. Certainly a really strong first game. And DraftKings hasn't updated the game logs yet, but really strong first game for Taylor, playing a Jacksonville team that Antonio Gibson ran all over last week. He looked really good. So I wouldn't be scared off of going to Taylor. Then again, I see Christian McCaffrey $1,000 less than him. And I get that McCaffrey was disappointing in week 1, but as far as playing time was concerned and usage was concerned, it was still there. And he still should be a guy that's closer to 9,500 to 10K when he's fully healthy. I'd be going right back to that. Well, I'd hope that his ownership maybe comes down if people are scared off a little bit. The Giants will be riding a little bit high. They did a very good job stopping Derrick Henry in this past week, but this is a much different back than Derrick Henry. And in fact, Dontrell Hilliard, who ended up being the Titans passing back, did score 2 touchdowns. The Giants linebackers are really, really weak in coverage. So I actually think this could be a huge CMC pass catching game. Really into McCaffrey once again here on this slate. Other guys at the top, Kamara, who has the questionable tag there. I think he's going to play, a little bit of a tough matchup with Tampa Bay, who's been, very hard to run on for years now. I think the field might be off him a little bit though, which could be interesting. Certainly one of those guys that for years has been one of my, matchup proof guys that makes my pool every week. I think it's in play, definitely not as exciting as even the guy right underneath him, and that's Saquon Barkley, who, man, did he look back last week. Incredible performance against Tennessee, single-handedly took the Giants to that win, over 30 DraftKings points. His price is up now from 6,100 to 7,300. I think that's a totally fine price, though, for what his workload is, which is like a true 80%, rushing share guy, which those are few and far between here in DFS. Yeah, and we saw, they're playing a Carolina team. We saw Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt have a lot of success against them last week. I kind of like the Carolina front seven over the last couple of years. I think they still have a bunch of names there, but, and there's definitely risk here. There's certainly a chance that Carolina will look to sell out to stop Saquon, but I think he's still in play, even though he'll be pretty popular. Mixon could fall through the cracks a little bit here against Dallas. Elite usage last week. Fournette ran all over Dallas. 7,200, kind of in a spot right under Kamara and Saquon. Yeah, I have no problem using Mixon in tournaments this week. Chubb gets the Jets at home. That's in play. Like him better on FanDuel always with the touchdown upside, not as much pass catching upside, but he's in play. DeAndre Swift, he has entered into certainly weekly matchup proof consideration for me at this point. James Robinson, and credit to that guy, man, coming off the Achilles. 2 touchdowns, looked good against Washington last week. DeAndre Swift, man, dual threat, unbelievable player for sure. I think James Conner is a really interesting spot this week. Definitely a game that we're going to be attacking the Cardinals and Raiders, I would imagine, as this week goes on. 6,900 is still too cheap for Conner's, elite role, touchdown upside. We'll be involved in the passing game a little bit. And I think there's a chance he does fall through the cracks a little bit here as well. Moving down the list here, man, Javonte Williams, 6,500. The guy just looked absolutely incredible last week. I think he's one of the guys that his price would be up if pricing came out after last night's game. 11 catches, just looked dominant. Did have the fumble on the goal line. But, I would have liked to see more than 56% of rushing snaps. But, I think that number will continue to go up and on full point PPR DraftKings, that's plenty if he's going to be catching those kind of balls. Guys that are still over 6K here, Antonio Gibson will be in play for me until Brian Robinson is back. And then, moving down the list here, some cheaper guys, Darrell Henderson's definitely the guy that I'm looking at there. I would imagine he's going to be pretty popular. Was like 82% of snaps last week. That's crazy. Cam Akers looks to be completely out of this offense right now. We know McVay likes to ride one guy. Henderson was productive last year when he had that role to himself as well. Definitely into Darrell Henderson this week. Just came out that Najee Harris said he's going to play. So I guess I would take Jalen Warren out of consideration at 5,400. But hey, I wouldn't mind sprinkling into large field. Then again, stopping the run wasn't New England's problem last week. I think it's in play in very, very large field stuff. I think the risk of re-injury on Najee stuff is high. And then Michael Carter on the Jets, was clearly in front of Breece Hall. I think that's interesting for full point PPR. Ramondre Stevenson as well, a touchdown guy that I like a little bit on FanDuel, probably a little bit more. And then one more guy I'll mention here at running back, Jeff Wilson Jr. Obviously, unfortunate, Eli Mitchell going to be out at least 2 months. That was always the risk with Eli Mitchell, very injury-prone player. We know Wilson is one of Kyle Shanahan's guys. That's definitely a play here at home against Seattle at 5,100. I'll be using plenty of Jeff Wilson this week. Moving over to receiver. Again, we don't have Justin Jefferson on the slate. We don't have Stephon Diggs on the slate. We don't have A.J. Brown. We don't have any of the Chiefs guys. We don't have any of the Chargers guys. So it's really a big three up top with Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, all guys that I want plenty of. There's really not much to say on those guys. Devontae Adams, we were a little bit concerned about, hey, what would this look like in Vegas? Moving away from Aaron Rodgers was absolutely incredible. Looked just the same. And, that shower narrative between Devontae Adams and Derek Carr certainly looked like it was helping out. Chase is in play for me every week. I'm a little scared off of that game in Dallas with Cooper Rush. I don't know if they could push the other side of it as much for Cincinnati, but it doesn't take much for Jamar Chase to get there. Debo, I'm down on Debo like a lot of us are at ETR this year. From an efficiency perspective is, hard to imagine that the guy even comes close to matching his production last year. Then again, in large field tournaments, I'm going to be using a lot of Trey Lance this week, I think. And he might be a guy that does not get too much ownership. Maybe casuals just in the very large field. the toilet bullshitter lineup builders maybe click on Deebo Samuel, but the ceiling's still there for a guy that has the dual rushing, receiving capabilities. Imagine the weather will be much better than last week. I think he's in play. He's a guy to look at. Probably not too interested in CeeDee Lamb at 6,900 with Cooper Rush at quarterback there. Mike Evans, same thing as what I was talking about Brady. I'm probably steering a little bit away from that Tampa Bay offense this week. But then again, just because, in the 2-3 years that Brady's been in Tampa, he hasn't had too much success against New Orleans up to this point, doesn't mean it can't happen now. They're in a dome. We'll see what happens. Pittman, obviously chalk hit in a huge way this past week, and that was highlighted by Michael Pittman Jr. at 5,500. They bring him up to 6,700. I have someone in the chat saying he's still too cheap. Maybe. I think that's, around where he should be, between 6,700 and 7,200 or so on DraftKings. But, this is a Jacksonville team where all three wide receivers on Washington got theirs last week. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson. Would not be surprised to see Pittman continue to perform. Moving down the list, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown at Washington. I think there's some interesting guys. Marquise Brown failed in a big way last week. I wouldn't completely rule him out this week in that matchup that we like. And then again, I'm really into these Denver guys. So I'm going to be into Russ stacks. I think Sutton and Judy once again. Sutton at 6,100. It was a Judy game last game. A lot of the time in Seattle between Metcalf and Lockett with Russ, we saw, 1 week it was Lockett's week. 1 week it was Metcalf's week. I don't know if it will be the same way in Denver, but if it is, that means this is a Cortland Sutton week. Could definitely see it happening at 6,100. That's a price that I like. T. Higgins will probably be out with the concussion, so there might be some value there. Look out for the cheap wide receiver volume column that'll come out on Thursday for information there. Moving down the list, Christian Kirk, I'll continue to be interested in while he's under 6K. I mean, the volume is going to be pretty crazy there. Hunter Renfrow, very disappointing in week one. Caught, 3 catches for 21 yards. Again, this is going to be a game we're going to be attacking. I think a lot of people will be all over Adams. I certainly like Renfrow at 5,500 with full point PPR. He'll start to get his, no problem. And then as you kind of go underneath to some of these cheap guys, I guess there's Brandon Ayuk over here as well. Fits into my Niners theory. I'd be interested a little bit there. He's someone that's interesting. Anyone under 5K we'll talk about in depth on the cheap wide receiver volume column, but Curtis Samuel is someone, man, that 11 target seemed like no fluke. There'll be a lot of 3 wide receivers sets. I'm guessing they might be steamed up a little bit, but someone to consider. And then just one really cheap guy, man, Greg Dortch, 3.5K, didn't raise his price. The guy ran crazy volume, 59 of 65 total snaps, ran around on 44 of them and was productive. It's a guy that looked good in preseason. Was a little bit of a journeyman, was a 2019 undrafted guy to Wake Forest, but was productive there. I doubt Rondale Moore's back. He's also 5'7", fits right into that role. So, I think he's definitely going to be in play as one of the cheap punts on this slate. Tight end is a little bit bleak outside the top. The theme at the top here, Andrews, Waller, and Pitts, all guys looking for redemption after their week one performances, all being underwhelming. I think Andrews is certainly in play at 6,400, like him in Lamar stacks. Waller, same thing. Arizona, you can see, whatever DraftKings metric were first against tight ends last year. I think they've been historically okay against tight ends in these Kyler teams, but I'm not too scared of going back to the well there. It's Darren Waller could certainly succeed. And then Kyle Pitts, I like quite a bit. I think the Atlanta offense in general looked a little bit better than I thought. I think Drake London is in play as well against that Rams team, especially if you're going to do some Ram stacks, if you're interested in doing that kind of thing. Hard to get into Schultz with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I think Zach Ertz at 4,500. He played the whole game, scored a touchdown last week. Obviously, we were worried about the kind of volume that he got with, Kyler last year repeating. But, at 4,500 in correlation with that game, I think it's interesting. Not too many punts I'm interested in this week. Alberto, the usage was encouraging last night. I think he played 44 total snaps of 60 something. So very solid there. A lot of that preseason concern look to be, silly. So I'd be interested in him as I'm going to be interested in all these Broncos this week. I'm interested in Njoku in a bounce back after only catching 1 pass last week. His upside's there. And then Mo Alley Cox, I'll continue to be interested in as well as a guy with touchdown upside. He's 3,200. Not too many punts. Yeah. So Will Dustley, we have Dustin asking about, so the pricing for Seattle is going to be the same way with Denver that, it was before last night. Dissly, I mean, 3 targets, 43 yards, and a touchdown last night. If you want him to be your punt, by all means. I'm not going to be so into Seattle this week. That was an emotional riding high game. I get it. He's a 2,800 guy. I have no problem with it. But I'm not too interested in these big punt tight ends this week. Tight ends a little weak this week in general. DST, I'm not going to talk too much about DSTs on this show. So random. We talk about that all the time. But, you can see up here, the Rams get the Falcons, 4K. I'm sure they won't be too owned because of that price. Definitely like the Niners in that same vein where I expect them to bounce back big. Same thing with Denver, moving down the list here if we're taking some punts. The Saints, 2,400, Brady doesn't make too many mistakes, but it's cheap. They're at home. The Tampa Bay's offensive line is really vulnerable right now. The Bengals at 2,200 against Cooper Rush. I would guess that's a strong option as well. That'll just about do it for our first week here on this show. The idea, again, just to kind of get you in the mindset. Quick in, quick out. Let's start looking at these guys and then, get you set up for the rest of the week. Obviously, you'll have Adam and Evan's team by team podcast coming out later today. And, that'll get you more into the weeds on both qualitative and quantitative stuff. Quickly on FanDuel, I think Derek Carr is a little bit more interesting over there. He's got a good price. TD equity, I think, is going to be pretty high on someone like him this week, only 7,300 over there, same price as Marcus Mariota. Russ, same thing, still interested in the Broncos guys over there. He's 7,500. I think Henderson still interesting over there. Javonte Williams still in play over there. And then I mentioned Ramondre Stevenson. He's a guy that I think is really interesting. Mixon, just crushed the Steelers on the ground last week. Touchdown upsides there for him. Damian Harris as well. And I continue to like James Conner with high touchdown upside too. Receivers that stand out over there. I think the Broncos guys, Sutton, 6,800. Christian Kirk, 6,500 is okay. DJ Moore, only 6,200 over there. Again, I'm not too confident in this Giants defense. Although they did a good job taking out the pass last week. Wouldn't be surprised if Wink tries to do the same thing where he takes out CMC this week. And that'll just about do it. Tight ends, a similar story over there. But Mark Andrews is significantly more expensive than anyone else. You still do have Taysom Hill at tight end over there, 6,200. It's going to be hard for me to put him in my pools week in, week out. I would say keep an eye on George Kittle. He's hoping to practice tomorrow, is my understanding. We'll see if he can get on the field over there in San Francisco. If he is, I wouldn't mind playing him in large field, even if he is a little bit limited given the state of the tight end position this week. All right. And that will just about do it here for the first week 2 look. We wanted to start in week 2, given that week 1 prices were out for so long. We'll be back next week with a quick first look once again on Tuesday morning. Tune in a half hour. I'll be live with Ryan Reynolds and Adam Levitan to look at the season-long awards market. We're going to have a weekly show surrounding that as well. Of course, Ryan is the awards betting market king. So hope to see you there. Thank you for tuning in for this first look show for Establish the Run. Appreciate you joining me. Good luck in week 2. Take care, everybody.